Hey, it's great to have you watching Central Online. We're in the fourth part of our series titled More Than Dust. And I hope that this series has been helpful to you, encouraging, challenging, whatever you needed it to be. I hope that God's been working through it. I'm excited for our next series that we're starting, simply titled It's Not Getting Easier. And this is a series that I'm doing all about parenting, because parenting is not getting easier. Even if we don't have to have our kids walk uphill both ways to school, there are new challenges and new obstacles, and it doesn't seem like it's getting any easier, and I don't think that it's going to get easier as the years go by. So really excited for that series. But for this one, what we're talking about is sometimes kind of how our soul is going to last forever, right? Our body is temporary, our soul lasts forever. But so often we get it twisted, right? And we have to understand and recognize that we are more than dust. And so for the message today, we're going to talk about this idea of being seduced by a fake or by a counterfeit or by something that's not real. You know, growing up, I love going to stores like Save-A-Lot, or different places like that where they sold generic stuff, because I just thought it was wild. Like that people would just kind of take what was like a mainstream product and try to put their own twist on it. I found pictures of chips by the name of Prongles, right, instead of Pringles, and their tagline was "Once you pop, that's great." Like not like once you pop you can't stop, but once you pop, well, that's great. Okay. Or I saw one. It was Microsoft Bimbos instead of Microsoft Windows. Wild, right? Like they didn't even really try that hard. Or one, it was a picture of a little green action figure. At the top it said the Revengers instead of the Avengers, and it was not the Incredible Hulk, it was the Incredible Fella, right? The Incredible Fella, part of the Revengers. The one that really tickled me, man, was the card game right? Instead of Uno, they just like let's just do that, right? That's close enough. And I would have loved to have been in the marketing meeting. Like I imagine some generic corporate building, right? And they're going around the room sharing their ideas. Okay, well, how are we going to rebrand this card game Uno? And somebody's like, Dose? Could we call it Dose? Like, no, that's too generic. And they asked the new guy, like the intern, and he's like, and they're like, that's genius. It's Let's go with right? Fakes are kind of funny to think about, to laugh about, to see at a store, and you're like, okay, that's clearly a ripoff. That's clearly a knockoff. But the reality is, so many people are actually falling for fakes, for counterfeits, for substitutes of the real thing with what really matters, our soul. Our soul lives forever, and yet sometimes we're really tempted to fill our soul with fakes and with counterfeits. And so that's why this series, I think, is so important, is because we are more than dust, right? Like our soul will live forever. When God spoke everything else into existence, He created mankind by forming him from the dust of the ground, and then He breathed His breath of life into his nostrils. It's this beautiful image that is more than just poetic language. It shows that we were created differently. We're made in the image of God, and that we have a soul. He breathed His breath of life in us, but He didn't do that to the dogs that He created, the birds of the air, or the fish of the sea. He only did that with mankind. And yet, there's so many things that will try to seduce and pull our soul away from the real thing and from what really matters. I think that is why one of the first, or the first of the 10 Commandments is, you shall have no other gods before me. Exodus 20 verses 3 and 4 says, you shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. So why is it that our souls are so seduced by these fakes and these idols and worshiping these idols? Right? Like why early on in the Bible does that have to be the first of the 10 Commandments listed? Like it's such a big deal. Well, it's because our souls are created differently. We were created in the image of God. We were created to connect and worship with the one true living God, and sin has caused this disruption. But we were created to be worshipers, not to just show up and do some worship, but we were created to be worshipers. But what happens is we slowly start to fill our soul with other things, right? And our soul is drawn to these counterfeits, to these fakes, and that is why we can have such full lives, but be totally empty on the inside. Doing things that might look or feel good in the moment, but ultimately it doesn't fulfill our purpose, but we've kind of been sucked away from it. understand the things of this world can never satisfy the soul, because our soul was created to worship the one true God. So that's why God said, you should have no other idols before me, put nothing before me. Deuteronomy 4:16 says, so do not corrupt yourselves by making an idol of any form, right? Don't corrupt yourselves by making an idol of any form. And then it makes this list, right? And I like this list. It really lays it out. It makes it simple for my brain. It says whether a man or a woman, okay, and remember, this is saying don't corrupt yourselves by making an idol of any form. And then he lists what could be some of those idols. Whether a man or a woman, an animal on the ground, a bird in the sky, a small animal that scurries along the ground, a fish in the deepest sea. And when you look up into the sky and you see the sun and the moon and the stars, he says, all the forces of heaven, he says, don't be seduced into worshiping them. I think that's a very important phrase. Don't be seduced. It doesn't just happen immediately, right? There's this seduction that happens where you're slowly let down your guard and you're pulled away. The NLT says don't be seduced. The NIV says don't be enticed. The New King James Version says don't feel driven, right? If you're driven to something, you don't do it immediately. It's a process, right? You're driven there. It's a lot of little steps heading in that direction. The ESV says don't be drawn away. It doesn't say be abducted, right? Drawn away. The HCSB says don't be led astray. I think the phrasing is very important here, because let's be honest, choosing these fake gods and things isn't just something that people wake up and one day they're like, you know what, I'm going to start worshiping the sun today, right? There might be times in the middle of winter here that we're really excited to see the sun, right? And in a couple of days, it's supposed to be sunny and like 70. It's going to be beautiful. And I'm going to be really, really excited to see the sun and to feel the sun on my face, right? But I'm not going to go out and worship it. I don't know anybody that would walk outside and be like, oh, look at these furry little animals that scurry along the ground. I'm going to worship them, right? I'm not going to be going out and worshiping the birds of the sky or things like that. But what happens is people are actually just slowly seduced into worshiping something, right? Something other than the one true God. We feel enticed, we feel led astray, we feel drawn away. But when I look at the Old Testament, I look at some of the stuff that they were struggling with making as false gods or idols, and I'm like, that's kind of dumb. You know what I mean? Like, I think we can say that. I think it's okay to say that, right? It's kind of dumb that you would worship a golden calf. Like, why a cow? You know, like, have you ever been around a cow? They're dirty, they're smelly, they're kind of stubborn, right? And they taste really good. So why would we worship a cow? You know, or like they had to mention, like, don't, you know, worship the animals that scurry along the ground. Like, yeah, that's not even a temptation for us. You know, so I look at the people in the Old Testament and what they were worshiping, and I'm like, yeah, that's kind of dumb. Like, we would never do that. I would never fall for worshiping an animal like that or something just so dumb. And so you see that happen in the Old Testament, and you're like, well, this is really irrelevant to today, right? Like, I don't have to worry about it. This is super irrelevant today. We don't battle with that. We don't even have idols anymore, do we? The reason we think idolatry looks so dumb sometimes in the Old Testament, and we think it's irrelevant today, is because it is really hard to see idol worship in the mirror. But it's so easy to see it out the window. You look out the window, you'll see it, right? It's so easy to see in other people. You can see what they've been seduced into. You can look at the things they're doing or not doing, and you can tell that they're struggling with it. But when we look in a mirror, well, we've been seduced. We've been enticed. We've been led astray. We've been drawn to it. And so we justify it in our mind, right? That's why I think that phrasing is so important, is it doesn't say don't start immediately worshiping a false god. It doesn't happen that way. We're seduced. We're drawn away. We're led away. We're enticed to it. In the U.S., we have plenty of idols, all right? I think one of the biggest ones is our stomach, right? We love food. We are consumed by food. We talk about food. We think about food. We plan for food. We save for food, right? We take pictures of food. It's just like nonstop sometimes, right? I think if we're not careful, that can become a god. Or I think about sports, right? Multi-million-dollar athletes making multi-million dollars every game. I fill in these stadiums with hundreds of thousands of people who are draining their life savings away to go and watch these people and cheer them with their name on their back, right? And it's like, if we're not careful, that can look a lot like idol worship, right? Or how about phones. I know that's an easy one to pick on, but it's easy because it's so obvious, right? We spend hours just like sitting there looking at our phone. It's like, yeah, we don't bow to idols. We're pretty stinking close to bow into our phones, aren't we? We can see idolatry in others. It's really hard to see it in the mirror. And I think that's because if we're not careful, our soul will be led away. It will be enticed. Our soul will be led to something that is not the one true God. And without knowing it, we've elevated something else to the place that God should be in our heart. Or at the very least, if we're not careful, we lift something else close to the place of God. We may say, well, yeah, God's still my one, but this is 1A. God says there should be no other idols before me. It's like he's on the throne and he's looking out. He doesn't see the stuff stacked behind us that we're hiding. Like, no, God, I'm with you, but I just brought all this stuff too. It's not like that. Jesus asked this question. He says, what good will it be for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? He says, what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? That's in Matthew 16:26. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? What can someone give in exchange for their soul? I don't know, but I see a lot of people trying it, right? I see a lot of people filling their life full of these false idols of things of the world that won't satisfy. But they've been led astray, they've been tempted. And so the first thing we need to do, as we remember that we're more than dust, is we need to identify those idols in our soul. Identify the thing that has been elevated into a place in your heart, into your soul that it shouldn't be. Psalm 23:4 asks this question. It says, who may ascend the mountain of the Lord? In other words, who may be in the presence of God? Then they ask it again, who may stand in his holy place? And then they answer it. Right? The second part of that, verse 4, says, the one who has clean hands and a pure heart, who does not trust in an idol or swear by a false god. Those are the people who can be in the presence of the Lord. The one who has clean hands and a pure heart, the one who doesn't trust in an idol and doesn't swear by a false god. Like I said, idol worship is really hard to see in a mirror. And if we're not careful, this is the part of the message that's super easy to rationalize or minimalize or talk yourself out of. Because truthfully, there are a lot of things we do that I don't think are idols. I don't think it's bad to go to a sports game. I go to a sports game and I yell and I cheer and I have fun. I like eating good food. If you don't like Chick-fil-A, something is wrong with you, right? We'll talk. We'll have counseling, okay? Right? It's okay to like good food. It's okay to have nice things. It's okay to have hobbies. There are those things that we can do that aren't idol worship. But I'm also guessing that part of the devil's strategy in our lives is to take some of those things that are good, right, and turn them into something that we worship. Turn them into something they're not. To lead us away from the one true God with something that entices us. He's not going to try to entice you away with something that you have no interest in. He's going to try to take something you do have an interest in. He's going to try to lead you away. He's going to try to twist it and pervert it and make it into something it's not. And so we have to be very honest with ourselves. What am I putting in my life? And how's the devil going to try to use that? What are the idols of my soul? And if you're struggling to figure that out, I have three filters you can run this through. First of all, what am I spending my time on? How do I spend my time? Run your time through that filter. And that will reveal some stuff that might stick out to you. Number two, how do I spend my money? Right? If you find you're always spending your money on the same things, right, other than like paying your bills, but what do you spend your money on? And then the third thing, what do I talk about? What am I constantly talking about or texting about? If you find that the vast majority of your time and energy is always focused on the same thing, or if you look at your bank account and you realize that, man, I'm spending a lot on this one thing, and I've stopped giving to the bride of the church, and I've stopped supporting missions because I need to have 12 different streaming services, you might have a problem brewing. If you find your conversations are always drifting into this one thing or this one topic, because let's be honest, if you love God, if you have a close relationship with Him, He should drift into our conversations, even our casual conversations. So run your life through those three filters. How do I spend my time? How do I spend my money? And what am I always talking about? You might find that you're seduced into worshiping your home, right? We love that. You might find that you're seduced into worshiping your children. That's a weird one for a lot of people, but I see a lot of people struggling with that. They've elevated their children to a place above God. How about an image, right? Sometimes people are seduced into worshiping this image, this facade, this fake. They become the fake that they start worshiping, is how other people see them. We've mentioned hobbies or online identity. How about your phone or your career? What I want us to do is just take time to identify the idol of our soul. What is it that we're struggling with? Full disclosure, at times in my life, my idol has been other people's approval. I've really sought people's approval, sometimes the wrong people's approval. I've sometimes cared more about other people's approval than God's approval. And that's a very dangerous game. It's a very unhealthy place to be spiritually and mentally. And luckily I've been able to identify that, correct it, and I have no plan on going back, especially as a preacher. But it took me identifying it and understanding my calling. But there have been stretches where that was a real struggle for me. So take time, run your life through those filters and identify the idol of the soul. And that's the easy part. The next part is the hard part. Then you have to tear down the idol of your soul. Right? Don't ask God to help you manage it or help you categorize it. Instead, ask Him to help you tear it down. Get rid of it. It's kind of like when I was a kid, I would be told to go clean my room. And I would just hide stuff under the bed. I had to hide stuff in the closet. I would hide stuff in my drawers. And my mom would come in to check my room, and she knew my shenanigans, right? She knew what was up. She'd pull all that stuff out from under the bed. She'd pull all those unfolded clothes that I tried to hide behind stacks of folded clothes out of the closet. She'd open my drawers and be like, nope, this is your sock drawer, not your junk drawer. This is your underwear drawer, not your junk drawer, you know? And she would just like go through and be like, okay, now we're going to do it right, right? And I think that's what we need to do with identifying the idols of our soul and then tearing it down, is we need to do it right. Don't just like, okay, I'll just kind of set it aside for later. Right? Look at this verse. God told Gideon, the people were struggling, worshiping all these false gods and bowing down to these idols. And God says this to them. He says, that same night, the Lord said to him, He says, take the second bull from your father's herd, the one 7 years old. Right? Then does He say, gently set it aside, store it safely, categorize it, just manage it? No. He says, tear down your father's altar to Baal. Right? Take that bull and tie it up to this altar and tear it down. Right? That's a violent process. It's not just like, oh, just peacefully disassemble it and use it for other stuff. No, there's this image here, right, that you're going to rip this stuff apart. You're going to tear it out, and you're not going to continue to be seduced by this opportunity to go to this altar and worship this false god. That's the stance we need to take. Like literally a bull in a china shop. Don't try to manage the idol of your soul. If it's seducing you away, tear it down. I think we all have idols that we need to tear down. And what we have to understand is that we've been seduced, we've been led astray, we've been drawn, we've been enticed by something we like, something we might even convince ourselves is really good. And what happens is we're seeking to fill our soul with that thing that will never satisfy. And the devil's got us right where he wants us. Right? He's just slowly enticing us away, drawing us away from what does satisfy. And that's a relationship with God. And that's why you have so many souls that are struggling and empty and hurting. In Scripture, Jesus came across this guy in Mark chapter 10 who was like that. He idolized his money, idolized his things. He seemed like a good guy, right? Jesus said to him, verse 21, Mark 10:21, it says, Jesus looked at this guy. He looked at this man. He looked him in the eyes, and He loved him. So as you're hearing this, understand that God loves you. He loves you, and that's why He wants you to tear down the idols of your soul. It's not a punishment. It's like, well, God never wants me to be able to have nice things, or be able to enjoy nice food, or be able to go do things that I like doing, or be able to relax. He wants us to have nice things. That's okay. I think that's really second. But He doesn't want our things to have us. And that's what I see so often, right? We become slaves to money. Rather than our money working for us, we're working for our money. We become slaves to our home. Rather than our home being a place of peace and relaxation and comfort and protection, we end up having to just like work like crazy to support our home. It's wild how often our things can have us. And that's what's happening to this guy here. Jesus talked to this guy, and the guy asked Jesus, what must I do to have eternal life? Jesus said, follow all the commands. And the guy's like, well, I've done all that. Which like, that's a whole nother sermon, right? Have you done that? But he's like, I've done that. But Jesus knew. He knew. He knew that he knew that this guy loved his things more than he loved God. So He looked at him, and He loved him, and He said, out of a place of love, one thing you lack. Go sell everything you have, give it to the poor, and then you'll have treasure in heaven. Then come follow me. Jesus loved him enough to tell him that he was settling for that fake and that he needed to tear it down. Right? I mean, take everything you have, sell it, then you can follow me. He knew he was settling for a fake and that it had led him astray. Scriptures say the man went away sad because he had great wealth, because it was an idol to him, because he had elevated it to a position, I would say, above God. And he didn't want to do it. He loved his idol. He knew what he needed to do, and he just didn't care. He was seduced into settling for something that was a fake. Sometimes you'll hear this passage and you hear people say, well, did Jesus really want him to sell all his stuff? Surely he didn't mean that, right? He would never ask us to do that today. I believe with all my heart that if it's an idol for you, yes, God would ask you to sell all your stuff. I believe with all my heart that if your home is an idol for you and you're working like crazy trying to support this home, I believe God would say, sell your home, downsize. I believe with all my heart that God is going to ask you to tear down the idol of your soul because your soul is that important to him. And he knows just how dangerous a fake, a counterfeit can be. I don't know what it would be for you, and I don't want to speculate a ton. It's easy to speculate. But I hope and pray that you know what that idol of your soul is or easily could be. And if there's something in your life that is more important than a relationship with God, don't settle for the fake. Don't try to manage it. Tear it down. Tear it down. Identify it, tear it down, and then the next thing we do, and this is the fun part, this is what I really enjoy. So after you identify it and you tear it down, you fill your soul with God. Fill your soul with God. There's 3 verses here. Psalm 84:2 says, my soul yearns. And I want you to listen to the description words, right? Okay, listen to these words. My soul yearns. It even faints for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh, what do? They cry out for the living God. Psalm 107, for he satisfies the longing soul, and the hungry soul he fills with good things. Psalm 42, 1-2, as the deer pants for streams of water, my soul pants for you, my God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When can I go and meet with God? Let's just be totally honest here. We don't talk like that anymore, right? People don't use that language like, oh, my soul yearns. It even faints for this. I have a longing in my soul. My soul thirsts for God. We don't talk like that. Those are wild words that paint a very clear picture of a soul that's just like searching for something. And right here, it's searching for a relationship with God. Our expectation is that we lead our soul, not the other way around. You don't let your soul lead you, okay? You lead your soul. You create the environment. You set the tone of what will feed your soul. Otherwise, you'll be led away. You'll be enticed. You'll be drawn away. I think if we're totally honest with ourselves, we hear those words, yearns, faints, a longing. And if we're going to attach those to something that we crave and that we desire, for a lot of people, Christians, they wouldn't attach it to time with God or a relationship with God. They're attaching it to earthly temporary things, right? It comes much closer to my soul yearns for more time on my iPhone. I'm thirsty for that next release of Yellowstone. I'm craving, I have a hunger for that next fancy meal. Not a more intimate prayer life. Not for Sunday worship. Not time with God. I have a longing for more comfort. Not a closeness with God. I think we have to be very careful and understand that our job is to lead our soul. And to do that, we need to fill our soul with the things from God. Max Lucado tells this story, and Max Lucado is a great author, right? Clearly a great author, great speaker, phenomenal man. He tells this story about a fish in the ocean. I spruced it up. I gave it the Andy abridged version, right? And I think you'll be able to tell what parts are from me. But he tells this story. Once upon a time, there was a fish in the ocean. Someone put the fish on the sand, and the fish didn't look happy. So they thought, well, let's take the fish. Let's give him a nice sandcastle home and a wad of cash. And that'll make him happy, right? Did it make him happy? No. So they're like, okay, well, he's not happy, so, all right, and, you know, his little mouth is there puckering, and his gills are flopping, and his tail's moving, and they're like, okay, well, the fish isn't happy, so let's give him a Bud Light and a Playfish magazine so he can look at the tail fins on these other fish, right? That part was from me. Okay, and so the fish, he's got his sandcastle home, he's got a wad of cash, he's got his case of Bud Light, he's got a Playfish magazine, and is he happy? No. Give the fish everything that you've got, and the fish isn't going to be happy. Why? Because the fish wasn't created to be on the beach. The fish wasn't created to be in the sand. The fish wasn't created to be there. The fish was created to be in the water. We aren't created for the things of this world. We're more than dust. We have a soul that will live forever. We carry the image of God. If your life feels empty, what I want you to do is lower your expectations of what you think you're going to get from this world. You're not going to find fulfillment from food. You're not going to find fulfillment from sports. You're not going to find fulfillment from your kids' activities. The only way to find eternal significance, eternal fulfillment, is a relationship with God. You were created for that. You were created for the kingdom of God and for His glory and to be a worshiper of Him. Nothing in this world will satisfy your soul. I hope this gets through, because we can't settle for fakes. That's part of the devil's strategy. One of my favorite songs is "Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus." Beautiful, beautiful song. And I hope, as I end our time here on this message, that the chorus of that song really sticks with you. As you're willing to identify the idol of your soul, I pray that you tear it down, and I pray that you fill your soul with God. Don't leave it empty. Don't leave it void, because it will be seduced and will be led astray with something else. But the chorus of that song says, "Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in His wonderful face." And it says, in the things of this world, the temporary things, the fakes, the things of this world will grow strangely dim in the light of His glory and grace. The more you wrestle with His grace, the more you wrestle with His glory, the more you try to draw close to that, the less the things of this world are going to matter. The less you're going to care about the fakes and the phonies and the counterfeits. They're going to become even more dim and more dim and more dim. And what's really going to matter is drawing close to Him. I hope and pray that you're willing to take that challenge, identify the idol of your soul, tear it down, fill your soul with God, and wrestle with His glory and grace. Love you, church.